episode 284. We are officially at the end of August, so in Michigan it's the unwritten rule that come Labor Day, summer's officially over, even though on the calendar it will give you until late September. But we're celebrating our last week with what I consider a pretty out-of-the-park show, Jimmy. You like that? Out-of-the-park show. But we have some amazing guests lined up. First off, in about 15 minutes, we're going to have former Major League Baseball player and former Detroit Tiger, Andy Dirks. He's going to be joining us. And in studio, we have, first off, friend, but not only friend, a Detroit legend, a Detroit ambassador, Emily Gail, who, if you've ever heard the phrase, say something nice about Detroit.
No,
I messed it up. I butchered it.
Yeah, you did.
Say nice things about Detroit.
Yeah, Lord.
Sometimes I think too quick, and but say nice things about Detroit. Emily coined the phrase. We'll have her recap the story, even though she's told it a few times on our air. But this time around, last time we focused really on like Hearns and Emmanuel and her being part of a great Detroit boxing scene. But I saw some pictures of her races and her, were they 5Ks?
Yep, 10Ks.
10Ks. They look like the Boston Marathon. There were so many people running those. And so I want to talk more about everything else other than boxing with you. And you have a unique perspective of Detroit. And she also has a Shinola watch that was named after her. If that's not the greatest honor that can be bestowed upon somebody, is when something's named after you, whether it be a street, a watch, anything. Truly a great honor, and couldn't have happened to anyone better. But as always, Jimmy's going to start us off with a sponsor that keeps everything rolling for us here.
Okay, give me 1 second. I just got to move some stuff around here.
We also have ring girl Mia, who's one of the nicest ring girls we work with in studio with us. She's got a great sense of humor and always fun. And then Rochelle, who is also a good friend of Emily's and has been running the board with us since we booted Ricky Rocks a long time ago.
And kicked him out.
All right, here we go. We have a new sponsor here at Podcast Detroit Studios. It is the audiobook giant Audible. By being a fan of this show and our network, we are offering you this limited time offer. You can start a 30-day trial right now and get your first audiobook for free by going to audible.com/Detroit, or you can text Detroit to 500-500. Audible has an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original audio shows, news, comedy, and more. You can download Audible apps for your iPhone, iPad, Android, and Windows phones for listening on the go. Audible has countless books on boxing and MMA. One such book, The Boxing Kings, tells a story of the heavyweight title in the days when it was a defining institution in the United States. Author Paul Betson places special emphasis on those champions who held a central place in American culture beyond just in the boxing ring, including John L. Sullivan, who made the title a commercial property, Jack Johnson, who in 1908 became the first black man to claim the title, Joe Louis, whose contributions to racial tolerance and social progress transcended even his greatness in the ring, Rocky Marciano, who became an embodiment of the American dream, Muhammad Ali, who took on the U.S. government and revolutionized professional sports with his showmanship, and Mike Tyson, a hard-punching student of boxing history who exemplified the modern celebrity. If you want to listen to this or any of the other countless books you can find on Audible, remember, you can start a 30-day trial and get your first audiobook free by going to audible.com/Detroit, or just text Detroit to 500-500. Don't miss out on this great opportunity. Sign up today.
Thank you, sponsors, for keeping the show rolling. We want to thank Podcast Detroit for obviously giving us the best podcast studio in the world. We're broadcasting live from Midtown Detroit. In a lot of excitement around here. Taylor Swift's playing a couple blocks away, but not only that, we're within all the stadiums, and it was actually kind of cool. Somebody actually recognized me. Was I going down the stairs or when I came in, and wanted to talk for a little bit, and that was actually fun. So it's neat being around actual people and having this kind of studio environment. So we thank Podcast Detroit for that. But if you'll notice what I'm wearing, Jimmy, it's 1984. The World Series MVP in 1984 was Alan Trammell, and it's not like we planned this out. You can't start 6 years ago planning out, okay, well, they'll retire his number, and we're going to hit 84 how we celebrate 1984. But this past Sunday, Alan Trammell's number was retired, and I felt it was kind of important midweek. You get so busy that you can't plan ahead in this industry, especially the fight industry. I don't know what I'm going to be doing every weekend. But when I found out that Alan Trammell's number was going to be retired, I decided that I was going to take my son to it. And there's a couple reasons why. It's a rare thing to have a number retired. You see it done maybe now because of ESPN more nationally, but to have a number retired by an organization is a special thing. And the one thing I could tell my son, because he doesn't know who Alan Trammell was, and that's almost a compliment to Alan Trammell, because he was so good at what he did, and he was such a quiet leader that, you know, he didn't make news or rock boats or anything like that. So, you know, he kind of gets passed up when people talk about some of the greats to ever play the game. But I did tell my son that, realize that when I started kindergarten, Alan Trammell was the shortstop. And when I graduated in 1995, Alan Trammell was still the shortstop for the Detroit Tigers. And if you think about that, 20-year career with one organization, doing it the right way. There was nothing embarrassing off field, nothing like that. Very humble guy. In 1984, I wouldn't say there was as many superstars as typical World Series teams, but Sparky Anderson was able to get the most out of the players he got, and it was a magical year, and Alan Trammell had a magical season, and it was just neat to see a guy that deserved it, long deserved it.
Mm-hmm.
A guy who was thrown into a manager position in which you couldn't win. I always hate, actually, and this is actually why I was glad Steve Yzerman went to Tampa Bay. I just think it's very difficult to stay in an organization and be a GM or a manager because people expect immediate results. And when Alan Trammell came as a manager, and the team did not have a lot of talent and was eventually let go for Jim Leland, that's tough. I mean, you're letting go somebody that has given a lot to the franchise. I never think that's a winning situation.
No, like you said, because there's too many expectations. They're like, oh, right, too quick. They're like, oh, well, we're putting a player into the coaching spot who won a championship, so obviously within 2 years they're going to win a championship. That's not how it works. And like even if you're a great coach, if you don't have the talent, no good amount of you as a great coach, you can make a bad team good and you can make a good team better, but you can't take a bad team and make them champions.
And I thought that was the best compliment, and Rochelle was there also, is that Dan Dickerson, who did the presentation on the field, said the nicest thing you could say about Alan Trammell is, you know, they held the record for the most losses in a season. Think about that. It was like 116. And he said that Alan Trammell every day, because you got to do the prep interviews for radio, was always optimistic, was always not down. And baseball seasons are long, and that's a great compliment to him that he was able to find the positives out of a long season. Mm-hmm. And that's something we'll talk to Andy here in a second, is that when things aren't going right in baseball, you still got 162 games to play. And it really does become the dog days of summer, in which you're just kind of riding out a season. Yeah. And so I thought that was great. The other thing I thought that was really neat about the Alan Trammell tribute is that team was different.
Which team?
The 1984 team.
Oh, okay.
You know, he will always be known with Lou Whitaker. Whether Lou Whitaker gets into the Hall of Fame is tough because it's such a stat organization. I think he may get in, but after that, no one else gets in. Gibby doesn't have it, the stats, and Lance Parrish doesn't have the stats. Sparky Anderson, of course, with Cincinnati and Detroit is in.
I think Gibby gets in, but not because of the 84 Tigers.
I don't even know if he's on the ballot anymore because of the 88 Dodgers.
I was going to say because of that home, that hit. Yeah, and the fist pump. Right. That became iconic.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, everybody does that. That became a American sports iconic signature move.
And he hit off Dennis Eckersley, who was not unhittable that year.
Right.
And basically that changed the series for the Dodgers.
Yeah,
And
My
exactly.
favorite moment in sports is Givey coming out of there,
Yeah.
limping around, going
Yeah.
around the.
Mm.
Yep.
Yeah,
that awesome?
exactly.
He was my favorite player in Detroit.
Yeah.
And so it was great to
Oh,
see
everybody
him.
loved
Yeah.
Kirk Gibson. Yeah.
He had such heart, and that's what I think of when I think of Gibby and Hart, and then Lou Whitaker and Alan Trammell. I think it's fair to say the greatest double team,
Yeah.
or not double team, but a double play combination ever. Well, double team like wrestling.
We need a bell.
That's a tag team.
Tag
we need,
team.
we need a bell.
And nice that Alan Trammell, isn't he still involved with the Tigers?
He does.
As
He
the
goes-
assistant to the general manager.
Yeah.
And, I mean, so he's still involved in the Tiger organization. And it was wonderful watching he and Lou make those plays at shortstop and second. I used to love watching the two of them.
Well, one of the things that they pointed out was that he'd stayed with the Tigers his entire career, all
Which
the
is
20 years,
difficult.
and that's unheard of anymore.
Yep, and that's same with Steve Yzerman. Very similar in the fact of the way they led. I don't think Alan Trammell ever was a vocal guy or throw chairs kind of guy, and Steve Yzerman was never that kind of guy. You were the first guy there, and you were the last guy to leave, and the youngsters picked up on that, and that's what made those two guys good leaders. And I don't even know if people know this, and they may not be friends anymore. Maybe that's why it wasn't brought up. But when Alan Trammell was still playing and Steve Yzerman was here, they were really good friends. Actually, they went to St. Andrews and golfed in Scotland, I remember, one off-season. And, so it wouldn't surprise me that those two guys hit it off, Alan Trammell and Steve Yzerman, because same demeanor, same kind of probably win mentality. But you also got to remember, Alan Trammell played during the time that Cal Ripken, who got all the shortstop credit, and so he, like Steve Yzerman was always behind Mario Lemieux and Wayne Gretzky. If he plays any other time, he's the greatest player at that time. But because Steve Yzerman played when Mario Lemieux and Wayne Gretzky played, you're
and that's
third
why
down.
Wayne Gretzky got on the NHL 19. And
Dude,
not Steve
Wayne was
Yzerman,
special.
which
I'm not even going
I
to
agree.
deny that Wayne was
I
special.
agree, but
dude.
I feel like because it's 19 that it
Right.
should be Yzerman.
Right. But at the same time, Wayne Gretzky realized how much a leader Steve Yzerman was, and when Wayne Gretzky was picking the Canadian teams, there was no doubt that Steve Yzerman would always be a part of it, and at minimum be the alternate captain. And but Wayne and Mario Lemieux were special. The old adage, and I've said this a million times, if Sergei Fedorov had the heart that Steve Yzerman had, Sergei Fedorov's the greatest player to ever play the game. It's just he didn't have the heart, right?
That.
Exactly. And I'm not saying
he did not have that same
didn't.
demeanor, period.
Right.
Yeah, he was a totally different kind of guy.
He was very Hollywood, always looking,
Yes.
and the Anaheim Ducks thing was never. I mean, that's why his number probably isn't in the rafters. Is the Ilitch family probably still does not like
No, that's exactly
that
right.
and the Carolina Hurricane debacle, where they had to sign him for all that money. But I mean, Nike wasn't even a part of hockey, and they were sponsoring Sergei Fedorov. He had the gold locks. He's dating Anna Kournikova.
Well, and you know that's why.
And no, he had the long hair. He had looks, Sergei Fedorov, and he was dating Anna Kournikova, which at that time was the #1 popular female in Maxim magazine and all those magazines. He was Hollywood, and Yzerman was like work at it. I mean, Yzerman's leg was blown out when my dad was alive, so like 1990, 91 when he slid into the post, and since then, I mean, every year for him to get ready with that leg was unbelievable. But we're going to be joined right now. We're going to call Andy Dirks, of course, a Detroit Tiger, but he also did have a stint with the Toronto Blue Jays, and I'm very excited to talk to Andy.
Hi, this is Andy.
Hey, Andy, this is Brad. You're live on the air with the Undercard. We have Emily T. Gail in here, which I don't know if you're too familiar with Say Nice Things About Detroit, but she's actually the lady that coined the phrase back in the day, and it still is a popular phrase in the Detroit area and getting some ground. And we're joined by Jimmy, my co-host, Ring Girl Mia, and then producer Rochelle. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no, thanks for being on. It sounds like you got a good crew.
I wouldn't trade them for anything. So let's start off and talk a little bit about your career, and then we'll get into what you're into with mental coaching and everything. But first off, you were a Detroit Tiger, which makes you already an Emily T. Gail probably favorite because, anybody that was a Detroit Tiger at any period of time, Tiger fans do embrace. But not only that, an injury-plagued career, but a very good outfielder. Good hitting. I think you finished with a 276 batting average, which is very respectable. And to me, because we cover pro boxing and MMA, anyone can turn pro boxer. Anyone can turn pro MMA. You just got to go to the Capitol and fill out your test. To become a pro baseball player, to me, is the hardest thing to do athletic-wise. And not only that, to hit a baseball is the hardest thing an athlete can do. Some comments on that. Do you first off agree with that? Is being a baseball player the toughest thing to do?
I think baseball does provide more opportunity to people just based on the physicality aspect. You don't have to be 6'5" to play baseball, nor do you have to be in the NBA, but statistics would show that most NBA players are tall, just based on point guards being 6'2", 6'3", 6'4". Also, there's less players in basketball per roster. In baseball, we have more players. You have guys who are a little more specialized in skill sets, such as pitchers versus position players. And most pitchers consider themselves athletes, and that's always a subject of debate in the clubhouse, which is fun, saying, you're not really an athlete, you just throw a baseball well. But overall, any respectable person, I think, can see that if you hit a level of the top of any game, of any business, of anything in life, the very elite few that actually get to do it, it is tough. It's very challenging, and there has to be certain things that line up, such as no injuries, things of that nature, and there has to be some determination and dedication on the part of the athlete. So I would say, respectively, that anybody that's ever played in any of the big three or any professional sports, Olympians, WNBA, these people who have excelled at a very high level, it's extraordinary. And I feel very lucky and blessed to be a part of a fairly elite group, So it's an honor, and it's something that's cool and took a lot of work to get to.
Yeah, and in talking about other sports, the farm systems, rightfully so, because there's so much depth in baseball. I mean, you got Rookie A, you got Single A Advanced, you got Single A, the Flying Tigers. I mean, just in your case, the Whitecaps. Then if you can do well, you make it to Double A, and then if you get promoted, you got to get to Triple A, and then you hope to God you were drafted by a team that doesn't have a lot of people in your depth category, because you could be a player that's Major League Baseball ready, but maybe you're just part on their depth chart and you're down in AAA. Like you said, it takes a lot of luck, but then the hard work through the minors. Tell us about the minors. What is it? Is it really like Bull Durham with bus trips and just riding it out, or how difficult is it to make it through a minor league system for a Major League Baseball team?
It can be very difficult. I don't believe that. I believe that baseball and all sports at that high of a level, they're businesses. They're run by business professionals. They're run by people who have a bottom line and number in mind to a point. They can't. Most of them are wealthy in other endeavors, but just the way they're rigged, they want the baseball team to make money as well. With Mr. Illich and Steinbrenner, some select few spend way more money trying to win because they want to win, right? But as a whole, baseball is basically a market, like any other market in the United States based on capitalism, which would say whoever's going to give me the best advantage to win the game is who we're going to place. So there are people that get log jammed, and I'm just your first thing you addressed I'm going with first. There are people that get log jammed, but over time, the cream rises, just like in anything. It might take you a little bit longer than if you were in a different organization, but I think that anybody, if that's good enough, will make it. It's a time thing. Now, going to the minor leagues, it is definitely a lot like Bull Durham. So if you look at the minor leagues as a whole, my first year of minor league baseball, I started out in low A because I got drafted as a senior out of college, So I was 22 years old. Usually rookie ball is more like that 18-year-old to, the younger players who get drafted out of high school. But my first paycheck was $1,100 for the month before taxes. So it's not like if you're in the minor leagues, you're making money. And my signing bonus was $22,000, I believe, which to me, I was like, oh yeah, I have made it. So then you get into the minor leagues, right?
Yeah.
You get into the minor leagues, and it's a long season. It's longer than anything you've ever played, 120 games. It's kind of like college extended to a point, because most of the guys you're playing with in the lower levels are similar in age, because you don't have the development. If you're not producing, you're gone, because they don't have time, and because there's a new set of players coming in the next year after that, right?
Right.
So once you make it to AA, it's kind of similar there, but you get a few more veterans, and really AAA is where, for me, it's a little more glamorous per se, but it's also, you're playing against grown men at that point. And when I say grown men, in our society, a grown man is about 25 years old, which is kind of sad, but that's the society we live in. With college and stuff like that, we're basically told to prolong childhood, go have fun, go explore, do things, right? So you start playing with grown men who are 35 years old and got 2 kids at the house, and you're like 24, still living that college dream, or that, not the college dream, but the lifestyle of a college kid. It's like, oh, life check, I better grow up. It's a lot of bus trips. We were in the Eastern League when I played in AA, 14-hour bus trips, guys eating pizza and burgers, and it's not like we're on a dietary restriction or anything. You can't afford good food. You get a meal stipend of $8 a day or whatever it is. Where can you eat a couple meals a day for $8?
Ramen.
McDonald's. So
Yeah.
that's what we ate. But when you're young, your metabolism is high, things of that nature. But it was a great experience. A lot of the guys that I played with, I'm still in contact with now, just because anytime you go through something like that with guys, you connect with them, right? You don't get to choose. It's basically like, imagine going through an entire year of your life that you don't get to choose your friends.
Yeah. That's
Like literally, you're just put in a space that's far away from home, far away from your friends and family at home, and you don't get to choose who you hang out with for a year. I mean, the only other thing, and I never like to compare sports to the military, but in this respect, I think it is a little bit similar to where you have a little bit of a brotherhood with the guys that you hang out with 24/7, that you don't get to choose who's around you necessarily.
Andy, it's Emily T. Gail. And I'm curious, when you were first told you were going to be brought up by the Detroit Tigers, what was your feeling about coming to Detroit? What did you know about Detroit? And so often players don't know a whole lot about Detroit when they come here, but it's amazing how many retire in Detroit.
Yeah, so when I first got called up, I was in Toledo. I had never been to Comerica Park or the city of Detroit in my life. I'm a small town country kid from Kansas. I lived 8 miles away from a town of 1,100 people on a dirt road. So, Wichita, Kansas is a town of about 400,000. That was a huge city to me before I started traveling in baseball. And I tell this, the beauty of baseball, the beauty of sports culture, is it literally took a small town kid from Kansas, put him in Detroit, and we could relate to one another. I thought it still amazes me to this day how the values that they saw in me are the same values that most Detroiters live by. Work hard, blue collar, grind it out, work for what you get, things of that nature, and it really made them attracted to me as a player, I think, just by the way I played the game, the way I acted. And it's funny because you think about it, one of the biggest metropolitan areas in the United States. I grew up on a dirt road 8 miles from a town of 1,100, but we still have a lot in common, and it's really cool to see that. So obviously I go to Comerica Park. At that time, I'd been to about 2 big league stadiums in my life, one in Kansas City and one in St. Louis. And I get out on the field, and it's like, wow, this place is big. They're cathedrals, the play where we play sports, the highest level. It's unreal every single time, and it never got old. Anytime they would announce, this is your 2012 Detroit Tigers, whatever year it was, the hair on the back of your neck kind of stands up, and it's an amazing feeling.
And and your feelings, about Detroit, did they grow? Did you start feeling more and more a part of the community? Because it's wonderful the way the players do get so involved in the community. And how long did it take before you realized that Midwestern value was really deep in Detroit as well?
It's from the people. So anywhere you go, it's never about buildings. It's never about anything. It's about people. So when I came in 2011, Detroit was just coming off of the biggest economic crash that any of us have probably seen in our lifetime. That's if you go back to post World War or before World War II, when in the 20s, that was similar. But in Detroit, the town had taken a massive hit. And we're talking about people who had lost jobs, their retirements. The infrastructure of the city was failing. The city was talking about bankruptcy. There was a lot of animosity. There was a lot of things that the Detroiters could have complained about. But when it came to going to Comerica Park and the game, they were just as enthusiastic as if nothing ever happened, which speaks a lot about a city. So when you get a group of people, and whether or not it was an outlet, but people who go through one of the worst economic times in history and still have the outlook and a positive attitude to say, we're not going to give up. We're not going to roll over. We're going to keep working, and we're going to find a way to make this work. It speaks volumes. So right there you say, okay, the character's here. The people are here. The people support you. The people have your back. There's really not anything else that needs to be said about what you would want out of a city that's supporting a team, a city that's supporting each other. So to be a part of that is a no-brainer that, okay, we want to get things done. What's the next step? Let's come up with solutions instead of gripe about problems.
Well, it was fun to, what was it 2011 or the year that in the run for the season, winning the season, the pennant, and
yeah,
the loyalty of Detroit fans, whatever sport it is pretty phenomenal, isn't it?
Without a doubt. You don't see many cities support teams like Detroit. And I've always said Detroit is probably the most knowledgeable city about sports as a whole. You have all the big sports here. Everybody knows something about hockey, baseball, basketball, football. Not many cities can even come close to comparing to the knowledge people have about sports. It was very evident in 2011 and 12 when we played the A's in the LDS, the divisional series. The athletics fans in Oakland, basically, when you play there in the regular season, there's hardly anybody in the stands. It's a football field. When the playoffs going around, what happens is all the football fans come to the baseball game. All the Raiders fans, they want to get wild. They want to, it's a TV spectacle. They want to be involved. The amount of noise was constant. It's the loudest place that I've ever played. The issue with it was they didn't understand the game of baseball. They were just being allowed to be loud. They were just yelling the entire game. It wasn't a home field advantage whatsoever because their players were feeling it just like we were. Where in Detroit, Detroit baseball fans understand. They're watching the game. They cheer when something happens that's good for their team. They boo when the other team does stuff, right? So just that dynamic of understanding sports is way more in Detroit than in other cities. When we played the Yankees in the playoffs, it's a spectacle. It's the celebrities want to come out and show face. There wasn't even people in the stands till the third inning. They left at the seventh, and that was in the ALCS Championship Series.
Pretty interesting. And was it 2013 you were a finalist for the Gold Glove Award?
Yeah, yep. In 2013, I was.
A nice accolade right there.
Yeah, you think about the great players that play outfield. You got to be pretty special in the outfield to be up for a Golden Glove.
And just part of my game is defense is something I always felt like I could control a little bit, definitely way more than hitting. Because hitting, whether you like it or not, it can be a bit streaky. Sometimes you get on a hot streak and you're hitting well. Sometimes you get a little cold and you got to figure out how to get out of that. But while that's all happening, there is no reason to not play good defense. in my opinion, and work at it. Work at being a good outfielder. I tell young kids this all the time. All a coach is asking you to do, or all your teammates are asking you to do, is give me a little bit of concentration. Give me your concentration for 3 hours of your day. And in baseball, it's a little different because it's a little bit slower moving game. A pitcher comes set, he throws the ball home, ball one. The catcher throws it back. So really all you have to do is little micro focus in very short bursts throughout the entire game. And you're going to be a pretty good player if you have some ability just based off focus.
Now speaking about that, I think baseball is a unique game, and it's fun to watch the game within the game. And what I mean by that is football, if it's the Cowboys versus the Lions, it's pretty intense. There's a lot of trash talking. There might be some greetings pregame. Hockey the same way, a lot of jarring. There's fighting during it. Basketball, a lot of talk. But when baseball's going on and you're on first base and you see the opposing team's first baseman, and Miguel Cabrera is great at it, Anthony Rizzo is, they get the other guy laughing. I've seen catchers and hitters talk. What is it about baseball that when you're competing against them, you're still having conversations out there? And what is the funniest thing that you can remember having a conversation with a catcher or a baseman when you're on the base path?
Yeah, so in baseball, there is much more turnover than any other sport. Hockey, you see guys play for the same team for 20 years. In modern-day baseball, guys are getting traded all the time. You don't know who your next teammates are going to be. The teams are different every year. There's a kind of a core group of guys that might stay there for 5 to 10 years if you're lucky. But overall, there's turnover in baseball at a higher rate than other sports. When it comes to kind of that playful attitude, you play 162 games. That's a lot of games. That's a lot of days on the field. That's a lot of hours out there. And baseball's a unique game to where guys are very competitive, but you also have to have a decent sense of humor, and you have to be a little bit more laid back than you would in like a football game where you play once a week. And if you're a special teams player, you might get involved in 7 plays that week. Where in baseball, you're constantly out on the field. You can't play with that kind of intensity for that many games without either going mentally insane or something physically happening to you, right? The funniest thing, probably, Ozzie Guillen was always a character. Guy threw over a pitch. Adam Dunn was playing first base. He's a big, burly country boy, if you don't know him. Big left-handed hitter. He when I stand next to him, I'm about 6 foot tall. This guy's like 6'7", like 270 pounds of pure man. That just shows you the diversity in baseball. Like, the littlest guy, the Jose Altuve, standing next to a guy like that it's a funny sight, but it all plays, because there's different positions. But I get this huge guy out there, and we're having a normal conversation. The guy picks over, and I was killing him that series. And Ozzie Guillen walks out on the mound and points over and like goes around his neck as a joke, right? Yeah. Like, hey, I'm gonna kill you. You keep getting hits, because he had to take the pitcher out of the game. And just that wasn't anything we talked about, but stuff like that happens in baseball. And if you don't have you got to have a good sense of humor. The good thing about most baseball players and athletes, I think, as a whole, is we don't take offense to things like people do in other walks of life. In office settings, it's a little more tight. It's a little more like, don't make me mad. Where in baseball, it's a little more fun-loving, a little more, you could say things that are on your mind. Nobody gets offended. It's fun. It's all fun, and everybody loves each other to a point because we're all there playing baseball, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's still a kid's game at the end of the day is the way I look at it. That being said, there's unwritten rules in baseball. Fill in our listening audience of maybe an unwritten rule that isn't out there. Obviously, with what's going on with Atlanta and the Marlins right now about hitting players and you got to retaliate. What's an unwritten rule in baseball that no one knows that is kind of one that is around the clubhouse that as a player but maybe the average fan doesn't know that there's an unwritten rule?
Usually don't talk to the starting pitcher. So whoever's starting, the starting pitcher that day
Gets to
that's
pick
there.
their own music.
And
I know
always give
that.
I always give pitchers crap about it. I'm like, I'm out here playing every single day, and for whatever reason, it's like their wedding day. Is what I always called it. Oh, now it's your wedding day again. So now it's all about you, and I can't talk to you, and you got to do this, and everybody has to cater to you as a joke, obviously, because I want them to focus and do a good job. But it's funny to me to think, okay, this guy's going to go out there once a week and pitch 80 to 120 pitches, and he needs so much attention. And it's drawn out. And it's like, that's the difference between pitchers and position players, though, too.
Well, they said
No
that.
point.
They said that the late Jose Lima, who was a very, very animated guy on the round, and I'm sure maybe with your teams, the starting pitcher normally gets to pick the music that's played in the clubhouse before the game, to get them ready. And Lima time, they used to call it. But I guess Lima had some of the worst music, people said, pre-game. He had a couple stints here in Detroit, but was a 20-game winner. But, yeah, I have heard that about starting pitching. When it's their day, it's their music. Not only that, Joe Torre said when he came out with a book and he had an interview, is that everybody had a team mentality, but he would give pitchers a little bit more leeway because they're just such a special breed.
Yeah, and you have to be to be able to go out and I don't want a pitcher who's fully sane. You know what I mean? I want one that's a little bit out there, a little bit off, a little bit different, right? I want a pitcher who, when he gets hit around a little bit, he can shrug it off and he's okay. Because most people, when you fail, and pitchers are going to fail hitters fail at a higher rate, but we understand that because we're doing it every single day. I want a pitcher who can brush things off quickly, which is not a common thing for most people. If something bad happens, you think about it for a while. You dwell on it. Even as a hitter, you get out. Okay, now you're going to go think about it for a little bit. What can I do? Where a pitcher, they throw one pitch and the ball goes over the fence. They got to go back in and throw another pitch right away. So it's like you need somebody who can flip the switch on and off quickly. And most of that is not a normal society norm, to where when something bad happens to you and a whole bunch of fans go ooh and boo, you don't have to keep performing. You know what I mean? Like if I strike out with the bases loaded in the bottom of the ninth or in the top of the eighth or whatever, but I go back to the dugout and that at bat. So whereas a pitcher, you might have to then again repeat to the next hitter fairly quickly.
Who was Andy? Who did you look up to as you were playing in the minor leagues or even in high school and as you were going through your journey, hoping to become a professional baseball player?
And I want to piggyback a little bit off her question really quick. You're from Kansas, so what was your favorite team also in addition to that?
The Royals I would have to default to. I was a kid who was very active. I didn't sit down and just watch baseball games. I liked to play the game. So when the baseball game's going on, Dad's watching the game, I'd watch it a little bit, and then I'd go outside or wherever, even in our basement, against the concrete wall, and throw a bouncy ball and catch it. And I was playing a game in my head constantly. As I grew up, guys that I really would call idolize, whatever it is, would be guys like Manny Ramirez, Sammy Sosa, the guys who were doing well early 2000s, late 90s was kind of my stride. George Brett was a player my dad admired, so obviously I admired him, and he would always say, "Oh, look at how he does that," right? And it's actually part of my program to, even in the big leagues, I would act like Ken Griffey Jr. I would emulate players while I'm playing in the big leagues. And there's a strategy for that, and there's a reason I would do it.
Awesome.
Being what?
Yeah, I was gonna say, what was that?
So,
What is the strategy?
And we can dig into this. My whole program, Good for Game Right, is based around a lot of these thoughts and ideas. It's basically practical ways to put into action thoughts, because the game of baseball is, in my opinion, by far the most mental game on planet Earth, due to the fact that it's kind of a one-on-one relationship between you and the pitcher, and then there's different aspects to the game. So with that said, I have what you call, it's a slump buster toolkit. it's something to get out of a slump. The first thing you hear coaches say is he's in his own head. How do we get him or her out of her own head? You know, whatever sport it is, if people are struggling, people naturally want to point straight at mechanics. Mechanics being, you know, the actual aspect of swinging a bat, kicking a soccer ball, swinging a golf club, whatever it is. The actual mechanics of my swing never changed that much. I could tweak them, I could do things to them, but my swing pretty much was what it was. Later on in my career, I understood my issues lied between my ears. So the quickest way, you say, okay, your coach says, you know, you just need to get out of your own head. Cool. How do I do that? Like, how do you go about that? That's a great statement. You need to get out of your own head.
It's very difficult, right? I mean,
like how would you get out of your own head?
I don't know. Brad's got his head so far. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that was.
Immediately when you say that, I think of Rick Ankle, who was a pitcher. Do you obviously you remember Rick Ankle, who for the Cardinals could not. I mean, not only was he missing the strike zone, he was Ricky Ivaning it like in Major League, where he could not find the plate, but then came back as a testament as a hitter. But that's who immediately I think of is a guy that could throw strikes, who is a pitcher, who's a dominant pitcher, and then just lost it. I don't know, because I've never reached that level of a pro athlete like you have. I mean, what's your advice on that? How do you get out of your head?
Yeah, exactly.
So the first step to getting out of your own head is don't be you. Be somebody else.
Turn your hat backwards in batting practice and be Griffey.
Become somebody else and be in their head. So guys, what I would always advise, guys you emulate, you look up to, it could be a Mike Trout, it could be whoever it is, and even guys in the big leagues, when I was in the big league, and even guys who are very successful in the big leagues, do this. They act like somebody else. One of the best months I ever had in the big leagues, I was Moises Alou in my head.
That's awesome.
It got me.
That's great.
It got me out of my own head into Moises Alou's head. It takes pressure off of you also. So the quickest way for me that I've discovered to get out of my own head is to not be Andy. And guys fight me on this, and I'm like, well, you know, how else do you get out of your own head? They never have a solution for it. So there's issues, and then there's solutions. So a lot of people they can point out an issue, but they never can respond with a solution that you can actually use. So that's my whole premise is, okay, here's the issue, here's a solution. It's pretty simple, but a lot of guys and people, they overthink things so much that they can't come back to a simplistic thought, an achievable thought that makes sense, especially to a kid, somebody who's maybe has some ability, but their dads maybe never played baseball. And this all started, I was getting phone calls from dads and different people in the baseball community asking me to go give them hitting lessons, this and that. And I think for me, my schedule is extremely busy. I don't have time to just go give hitting lessons constantly. That's not where I make my money. It's not how I support my family. I like to help where I can, but what I figured out is the best help I could give is the mental side of the game, because I think it's very overlooked and it's probably the most important aspect.
So let me ask you this. You said that the best way to get out of your head is to be someone else. Acting classes. Acting is a way that you become somebody else. Do you think athletes that have a hard time getting out of their head, like doing something like that, like maybe take an acting class, like might help?
You know, it very well could. I think as a whole, I don't want kids to emulate stuff that guys do all the time. So when I say act like somebody else, that's on the baseball field strictly. You got to be careful when you get into acting, because kids idolize athletes. At the end of the day, there are athletes with extremely good character, but there are also athletes that don't have great character.
I say that all the time.
That's part of, you know, parenting and things, and helping the youth understand what a little bit of critical thinking is, to be able to apply and say, okay, what that guy did, I shouldn't do. I don't want to ever give the idea or the impression that you should just completely be somebody different. If you go to class, you know, you can't be Manny Ramirez sitting in Spanish class in the 11th grade. But on the baseball field, the way that they play, and with access to technology and YouTube and things like this, that'd be the first resource I'd go to is YouTube. Find your player, watch clips of him, how he acts, the way he goes, and use his confidence and his what they swagger's a common term now. Use their confidence and their swagger. Take that. That's what you're really trying to get.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, what a lot of times what happens is, as you start struggling, your confidence wavers, right?
Oh,
And then
yeah.
how do we build that confidence back up quickly? How do we get you to get out of your own head? Because people want to go to a mechanical stance right away and say, well, you need to move your hands up here. You need to do this with your stance. You need to do X, Y, and Z. All that does is compound the problem, because now not only are they thinking about their failure, they're also thinking that their swing's not good, and then they're thinking, I need to adjust something quickly to be able to make an impact. And then what happens is it manipulates their swing into a negative effect that they're not used to, because regardless of however we like to break it down, a hitter, the way you have hit when you're younger, the way your eye sees the baseball, the way your hands come through the zone, the way everything works, your body naturally makes adjustments to be able to make contact with the baseball. So you go radically changing launch positions and angles and all this newfangled stuff that they have. You drastically change that. It takes away from your body's natural response to hitting the baseball. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And the reason we are having you on, we did go back, into the past to hear about your baseball career, but we were fascinated about your mental approach and how you're working with athletes and young athletes. Baseball's unique in the fact that, think about it, a 300 hitter that might get into Cooperstown means you failed 70% of the time at the plate. Explain to me what's so special about a baseball player that, I mean, in most sports, or even in job performance, if you get, hey, you're good 30% of the time, you're out of a job. But in baseball, you have to ride an 0-16 slump and then just get like enough to get something going in your momentum. Explain that a little bit, how you mentally change that in life too, because there's people in life that might have hit a down streak too. In baseball players, I know people would say there's no crossover, but baseball players, relatively, there's less highlights than there are more highlights in a career.
Definitely. So basically, when you break failure down, you got to be careful the way you term it to young kids. A lot of people say, without failure, there's no success. That's a great quote, but that doesn't mean just because you fail, there's going to be success. You have to do something in between there, right? So when you talk about failing a lot in baseball, just because you get out does not mean it's a failure. That's first and foremost. Just because something happens to you in life does not mean it's a failure. What is a failure is if you don't approach a situation in a successful manner. So what that would look like is, okay, preparation, practicing, working hard at it, and understanding concepts. And then I break it down basically into, everybody has a particular skill set. I don't care what it is. Everybody on planet Earth, barring mental capacity, things of that nature that are completely out of anybody's control, and all these are completely out of our control. People have skill sets. I'm not a great copyright per se. I'm not a good writer. I've tried. It's just not something that I'm naturally good at. Language is tougher for me, but I was very good at baseball. I could run fairly well. I could do different things. So using your skill set, all you're doing is, okay, what are my best skills? What kind of task am I trying to accomplish with this good set of skills? To what kind of result am I going to get? The misnomer between those is focus and preparation, right? So whatever skill set you have is really, to an extent, is only going to be as good as how well you prepared and how much focus you use those skill sets with when you go into a task. So when you say failure in baseball, as you go up levels, here's the difference. You get less at bats where there's failure, because the way I look at it is, really, to be a 300 hitter in the major leagues, you only get a fail 3 out of 10 at bats. Because this is the reason. There's fielders out there. And there's a pitcher out there who's going to strike you out sometimes. So to hit that, so say you hit in the major leagues 5 line drives, 2 get caught, two fall. You strike out a couple times. You have 3 terrible at bats. That other at bat, you get a little bleeder or something goes through. So really, all you're looking for is you need 70% success. When I say a quality at bat, right? So I break it down for kids to a quality at bat, not the result. In this society, it's getting harder because instant gratification is inevitable. The result is not the outcome. You don't worry about the result. Getting a hit is not a success necessarily, and getting out is not a failure. A quality at bat would be something like, okay, I had an approach, I had a mindset, I was prepared for that at bat. I took that at bat with a thought, a conscious thought to hit this ball back up the middle. Now, when I think that's the simplest approach in baseball. If I hit a ball that goes towards the middle, the shortstop fills the ground ball, throws you out at first. Was that a failure?
No, I mean, not in my
It's not.
eyes. No.
Because
because
you
you hit
did
the ball.
something that is repeatable that you can do again. The more times you repeat that pattern, the more successes you will have with it. Now,
that's great.
failure would come. This is where I would say failure comes. You have no plan. You have no idea of what you're doing. You're just out there swinging the baseball bat and wishing for the best.
Right.
And you get some hits, but it's inevitable you're going to be extremely streaky.
Like life.
I say it sounds like my
It's the same
dating
way in
life.
You know, having a
if
plan.
The kid who prepares for the algebra exam, even with less skill in math than another kid who doesn't prepare for an algebra exam, maybe they get the same score. But who's going to win in life?
The one that prepares.
The one that prepared. Because
Yeah.
that talent of that math quiz that he has in math will only take him so far. The kid who's constantly prepared, the kid who is focused and using whatever skill set he does have or she has to accomplish the task at the highest level possible, when adversity comes, they stick to that process. They stick to that process over and over. I prepare for the test. I take the test. But whatever the outcome, maybe they fail. But they do it again. They prepare for that test. They think about their skill set. Okay, I'm not good at math, but I can prepare for a test. And they do that. The stuff that they're good at then, the natural skill sets that they have, maybe it's music, maybe it's whatever it is, sports, they really excel at that. You know what I mean? Like, if you take that mindset at something you're already naturally gifted at, you can really excel at a high level.
Now, I do want to ask you a couple more baseball questions, but I do want to talk about your mental approach. If someone's interested in contacting you or learning more about it, we're joined by Andy Dirks, by the way, former MLB player, former Detroit Tiger, very good player. His career was cut short by injury. How would they get a hold of you, or how do you like them to get a hold of you? And what is sort of the process that you go through when someone reaches out to you?
Yeah, so you can go to getyourgameright.com. Basically, there's an opt-in page. You get the free Slump Buster Toolkit. You opt in. We get the email address. If you want, social media is really the best way to do it. I have assistants and I have people that help me to be able to monitor, okay, if you have a question, hit us up on Facebook, hit us up on Instagram, send a message. It'll get looked at. Because we're about to beta launch the whole Get Your Game Right program. A beta launch is basically, I don't want to develop products people don't want to know about. It's not only a waste of my time, it's not fair to somebody who wants the information. We're getting whoever wants to get in early. You get in. We're doing 8 modules over 8 weeks. We need your feedback. I need to know what people think about this stuff also. And we have the podcast, Get Your Game Right. It's a podcast. You can get it on pretty much any main podcast host there is. It's me interviewing not only professional baseball players, but also coaches, dads, scouts, all different aspects of the game to try to come up with a better understanding of not only how the whole process works, but also start understanding not only my opinions, but other people's also. Because I think it's very important for kids and for parents and people who want knowledge to not just, oh, Andy's the end-all be-all. I believe I'm very knowledgeable about this stuff because I worked at it for a long time, but there's also things that I want other people to be able to say also.
All right, so that's getyourgameright.com. I'm definitely going to enroll my son after the podcast, and I was going to do that after our interview anyways, Andy. I did have a couple more things I wanted to touch baseball before we let you get back to your family tonight. We do greatly appreciate this long interview. It's been fun, Andy. First, I got to ask you about shifts. It's Moneyball comes along, and all of a sudden analytics is everything. Theo Epstein obviously adapted what was being done in Oakland and won with Boston and Chicago. And now you see it's not uncommon for a third baseman to be in right field due to shifts. There's been some talk about eliminating the shift or how much someone can shift. What's your thoughts on the shift in baseball?
I think you should be able to put your players wherever you want to put them. I mean, it's if you this is where it gets. Baseball needs to be careful with the amount of rules they adjust. Like with most things, the game as a whole, for whatever reason, when a guy hits a ground ball to shortstop, he throws the ball across the plate. If the guy can run it a little bit, it's usually 1 or 2 steps. That part of the game is inevitably probably one of the best creations that could happen. Like how even guys throw harder, guys run faster, whatever it is, you can never outdo the game. The game, the way it's played, the dimensions of the bases, the dimensions of fields are a little different, but overall, the game as a whole, protecting the catcher, I get that to a point. We can't. These guys are getting paid so much money. You hate seeing an all-star catcher like Buster Posey bust his knee up because somebody slides in.
Right.
Now, nobody. The funny thing about this, though, is one of the highlights you see at every single All-Star game is Pete Rose running over the catcher who ended his career in the All-Star game.
Yeah.
And we love it, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to regulating things managers can do, what'll happen is it's like anything. It'll play out over time. You can put everybody on the right field line for all I care. Is it going to work? Probably not. So there's a point where the shift's only going to go so far and it'll just quit working completely. I don't think there's any reason you should regulate anything. People were shifting Ted Williams in the 40s and 50s. Ted Williams didn't care. It's not like it's a big deal to Ted Williams. He's one of the best hitters ever. You can only alleviate so much by shifting and doing these crazy things that they're trying to do. The baseball as a root of a game is played by people. Anytime there's people, it's inevitable, regardless of what you try to do, there's unpredictable measures, including emotions, including the mental aspects. We're not robots out here. You can't, whatever statistics, and people love them, they can come up with, which I love statistics for a lot of things, but at the end of the day, you can't fully predict who's going to win the game. You can't fully predict who's going to get the hit. You can't fully predict who's going to drive in the most runs. You can make an educated guess at best. So when you go shifting people, say a left-handed pull hitter's up, and you start throwing everybody into right field, and he hits a lazy fly ball over to the left field, eventually what will happen is he'll hit a skyrocket pop fly that should be the easiest out in the world, and it ends up being a double. Like things of that are gonna happen. How frustrating is it for a pitcher when he does his job, and that doesn't count it as an out, as opposed to, okay, maybe they caught an extra line drive in right field. The pitcher, I guarantee, would rather when he makes his good pitch and is doing his job, the guy's out.
I do have to ask you about steroids in baseball. It's come back again because Barry Bonds' number was retired by the San Francisco Giants. Whether or not, and it appears Ken Griffey Jr., this is a little bit before you became a pro, obviously, the Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, and Ken Griffey Jr. era. As far as we know, Ken Griffey Jr. was clean. There's been no indication that he ever was. He gets in. There's a lot of people, Roger Clemens included, that use performance-enhancing drugs. What's your thought on Cooperstown keeping them out and the whole era of baseball, whether it was a juice ball, the home run ball? What is your thought as a player coming behind that? And was there anybody that and I don't want you to name names, but was there anybody ever in a clubhouse that you saw doing something wrong, and you had to make a choice to do something right?
No, personally, I never thought. I looked at the long-term effects of steroids, and I never had anybody ever push steroids on me. I never had any indication of anybody taking steroids. There was a lot of speculation when I was playing because we were coming right off the steroid era. Where outfielders were hitting 50 home runs. This is what I say about the entire steroid era, and we'll just sum it up this way. Steroids are part of the history of baseball. Like any other thing, I do not want to throw it under the rug. I think these guys should be in the Hall of Fame, and however they want to do it, these are the best players on the planet at the time, whether they're taking steroids or not. There's other guys that were taking steroids that weren't that good. That's just God's honest truth. You know, we know that there was other players taking steroids that aren't going to be Hall of Famers. So whatever advantage that everybody says these guys had, was it really an advantage when the pitcher's up there throwing 96-mile-an-hour sinkers because he's on steroids too? No. With that said, the best part about when stuff like this happens is it's history. We need to learn from our history to move the game forward, to move anything forward in life. There was, in the 60s, there was so much discrimination and race wars and all this stuff going on that I never had to live through, thank God, but people did. But we learned from that history to move forward and progress. So the steroid era did happen, and it's okay. It happened. Guys were doing it. The problem is, it's similar with the American government, per se. Instead of nipping it in the butt, because what happened was, we'll break it down even more. There was a strike. The strike happened, baseball fans left. Steroids came to the game, guys started hitting a bunch of home runs, baseball fans came back. Baseball shunned their eye. They kind of said, okay, you know, we're not even going to address this. People knew steroids were in the game, but they didn't want to do anything about it because the fans were coming back. And when fans come back, the money comes back. And now, luckily, we've gotten past that and the fans stayed. You know? So it's an era that is part of the game. It's something for us to learn from moving forward. Okay, we don't need performance-enhancing drugs to make this game enjoyable for people to watch. We don't need this performance-enhancing drugs. Players don't need to take them to exceed at high levels. So it's something to learn from and move forward from. I don't think you can erase it by saying these guys aren't in the Hall of Fame. I don't think that's fair to anybody. You know, it's not fair to a guy who was taking performance-enhancing drugs when nobody was testing them for it. Nobody was saying, you know, X, Y, and Z, you can't do that or we're going to ban you from the game. Nobody was saying there's a penalty for doing it. Why wouldn't they take them?
Right, exactly. I mean, that's a great point. I do want to close with this, Andy, and I do appreciate your time with us. This is Andy Dirks, former MLB player. Also, getyourgameright.com. They're doing some mental coaching applications, and this is for life. It's for players, and I'm going to get my son involved with it. So we want to thank you for your time. But you played with two hands-down Hall of Famers, and Justin Verlander and Miguel Cabrera. Was there anybody that you played with that you just stood on the field and you're like, oh my God, that's such and such there? Because the one thing being around sports is that I've learned and being around clubhouses is that everybody thinks you hang out with everybody, but there are some income gaps. Some people are making $24 million. Some are making just the minimum, $1.6 million. There are some, groups within a clubhouse. Was there anybody that you just ever said, I can't believe he's on my team, and you got to watch him every night, or somebody that you got to play against that you were just in awe of?
So when Miguel Cabrera won the Triple Crown, and he was primed out. I mean, he was the most phenomenal hitter I've ever seen, bar none. Things that he could do, most people would never have a chance to do. If I tried to hit like Miguel Cabrera hit, I would fail miserably. He's got an ability that's way above and beyond what I'm capable of. The income gap, to me, it never made a difference. If you know me, I'll go up and talk to a billionaire like he's just a normal person, because he is. Right. It doesn't matter to me where you come from, anything. But with that said, Miguel Cabrera and Justin Verlander, I saw Justin Verlander load the bases with nobody out in Kansas City, and he struck out the next three hitters, hitting a 101-mile-an-hour fastball, 101, just throwing fastballs. Struck out three in a row. Like, he just had that in his back pocket, right?
Yeah.
And he could command it. Miguel Cabrera and I talked to him. I talked to Miggy about hitting, and I learned stuff from Miggy for sure. At the end of the day, though, he had an ability, his vision, the way he swung the bat, his strength, his balance, his timing, it's like the perfect storm for a hitter, right? He's got it all. He would talk about seeing the ball out of the hand and spin, and I said, I have no clue because when I get up to hit, I just see the ball coming in towards me. you know, like as much as I tried to slow the game down, he could. I think he could. The game didn't slow down because that's against the law of physics. But in his brain, his mental capacity, the way that he saw the ball was probably a little bit more in slow motion than the way I saw it. Just the way his brain perceived things and his vision and all this different. The caliber of hitter he was and still is extraordinary. I mean, it is. Sometimes he'd hit a home run in the opposite field on a fastball, 94 mile an hour in off the plate, and hit it to right field for a home run and get the barrel to it somehow without manipulating his body. It's beyond comprehension.
Well, Andy, we appreciate your time, and we don't want you to be a stranger. Hopefully, we keep communication up, and if something comes along, we'd love to have you back on the show again, and I'm sure I'll be communicating with you when my son gets involved. Once again, this is Andy Dirks, getyourgameright.com, and I'll let you sell it one more time, Andy. It's a program to help, and I'll let you sell it here.
Yeah, so basically it's a program designed to take you out of what everybody else is doing and give you a little edge. That's the mental edge. The mental edge in all of sports and in life is what most people use to succeed at a very, very high level. Our ability will only take us so far. I'm not promising the big leagues to any kid by any stretch of the imagination. What I want to do is if a kid really likes baseball and he really wants to work hard at it, I want to see them succeed at the highest level, the highest capacity that their skill set will take them. If it's a kid playing JV that wants to get on the varsity team, if it's a high school player that wants to maybe get a college scholarship and has that ability to do that, I want to see people succeed. And I think through this program, it's another tool to help them succeed. Like I said, it's another tool. It's not a get quick rich scheme. It's something that inevitably will help not only in baseball but in life.
Well, thank you so much, Andy. Great interview, one of the best we've had over the 6 years. And you know what? You're always part of the Detroit Tiger legacy, and it was great to have you.
Well, I love Detroit. I love you guys. Have a great night. Thanks so much for having me on.
All right, thank you, Andy, for so much time. That's Andy Dirks. Once again, it's getyourgameright.com. Check it out. And mentally, in boxing and MMA, clearly mental is a huge part of the sport. And so maybe we'll get some fighters out there to check it out too.
I think I'm going to check it out just for my dating life.
Well, there you go.
You know, I'm failing. Something's got to change.
As if that show.
You got to find your game first before you can get it right.
As if this show wasn't enough with Andy Dirks.
That really hurt.
I had to do Cody's job.
No, you pulled out a little Marv there.
It was really interesting to hear his perspective on life and on baseball, how it just kind of ties in with like the mental, his psychology and everything is really interesting.
It's
amazing, actually.
Now, do you follow baseball normally?
No, I don't, but it's crazy how much of the baseball part applies to regular life, and I just wonder if he's always had this like mental approach to kind of like a lot of what he said seemed black and white, like he's just really focused and he thinks about things real analytically, seems like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the point I brought up is that 30% success is a Hall of Fame career, and it takes a special individual to fail 7 out of 10 times and still be. I mean, I knew kids when I was growing up that quit paper routes because people wouldn't subscribe to them. They got halfway to the block and they're like, no one wants papers, and they didn't even go try the other.
Well, there are
commitment.
some kids who just didn't even want to go collect on their paper routes.
Yeah, I liked doing the job. I just didn't collect when I was a kid, but yeah, the crazy thing is that baseball is probably the one sport in which you mentally you have to be like pretty special to get through that. As if this show wasn't good enough, we have Emily T. Gail coming up here in a second. Jimmy's got What's on Tap. I know.
Yep.
And in addition to that, we have Britain Hart. We're pushing her back to about the 8:40 mark. We'll be back with Emily T. Gail after this break and Jimmy's doing What's on Tap. Then we're going to a break. Stick around.
All right. Do we have music? Is it there or no?
No.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. All right. This is What's on Tap, sponsored by Falling Down Beer Company. In the boxing world, August 28th, Wan Heng, Maya Tholin, Mayo Thin versus Pedro Tandurin. 12 rounds for Mayo Thin's WBC strawweight title. Moving down to MMA, August. Sorry, hold on here. August, where'd it go? Sorry, I'm scrolling through my thing because my printer cruded out on me. Sorry, September 1st, Invicta FC 31. We have Janaroba versus Morandin. That is in Kansas City, Missouri. And that's it for What's on Tap, sponsored by Falling Down Beer Company. Only two things. We're going to go to a quick break, and we'll be right back.
We gotta squeeze by you, Jimmy, real quick.
Hold on one second.
God bless you. episode 284. It's the Motor City, so we're putting the pedal down and having a great show. We just got done with Andy Dirks, former Major League Baseball player. We talked everything from the past of his baseball career, some fun stories. As Rochelle pointed out, it does humor me that he did say that the minor leagues is like Bull Durham, because Bull Durham is one of the greatest sports movies of all time. Even if you don't like baseball, Bull Durham is like one of the best movies of all time.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's legendary.
Yeah,
my
it's
friend.
pretty good.
Legendary. But our next guest needs no introduction, but I'm going to try to do it justice anyways. I call her the ambassador of Detroit. She has done more for Detroit with, I want to put this right, she's done a lot for Detroit on such a grassroots level that it's admirable, that within a sentence she summed up an attitude of Detroit, and this sentence has now been placed on Whole Foods. It's been on shirts. If you've been to Eastern Market, they sell the shirts. But Say Nice Things About Detroit has been associated with Emily T. Gale for how many years now, Emily?
Well, I started that in the mid 1970s. And it was really, it wasn't, I always say to everybody, it wasn't a slogan. It was a movement. It was a message. We had Emily's across the street. I had opened my first store in the late 60s in downtown Detroit, and Renaissance Center opened, and it sucked all the businesses from the financial district into the Ren-Cen, and it was murder capital of the world. People, walked down the street with their head down, and Say Nice Things About Detroit was really a survival tactic as a small business person. How do we get people to start feeling better about being downtown? It wasn't like make something up about Detroit, but there were many of us who lived in the city, worked in the city, loved the city. It was like we all have nice stories every day about why we love being in the city of Detroit. And that's all we were trying to say to everybody and what we found out was that many, many people felt the same way we did, was that there were a lot of nice things to say about Detroit. There were 5 times as many pros as there were cons in terms of things to say about Detroit. That was a cartoon that James Worth did in the Detroit News one time. It was, Emily Gale is right. There are 5 times as many pros as there are cons. And I always say it's much like us as individuals. When people are talking about me, I like them to share the nice things about me, not focus on my shortcomings, which we all have our shortcomings. And I'm working on my shortcomings. And the city is a collective energy of the same thing. There's a lot of great things going on. There's a lot of challenges. A lot of times people would say, oh, you act like it's so perfect. And I say the same thing today. No, there's a lot of challenges, and there's so many people that are working on the challenges in the city, but there's also a lot of great things going on. And, I wasn't the only person. A lot of times people will say, you were the one person doing the things out there. There were a lot of people that were working hard at it. I always say to everybody, we're pretty good at getting attention at what we did. But I can't say enough to all the people that gave us support and got behind that, not just people that came into the store and supported our Emily Detroit runs that started with 90 people, the first run. So when you saw that picture with thousands and thousands, it was the first run ever put on in the streets of Detroit. It was the support we got. The grassroots was exactly what it was. It still is a grassroots movement that is in the hearts of people. And all the shirts and everything that everybody puts out there, that Detroit one that we had back in the 70s with the heart over the eye, and then eventually I made everything, sweatpants, everything you can think of, gave it away with a $20 purchase initially. And someone in the press said, well, she had to give it away. Who would ever buy a Detroit t-shirt? And so now what I say to everybody is that, go buy the shirt. I love it when they buy a Say Nice Things About Detroit shirt. But buy the one that says how you care about Detroit. There's so many creative ways that people are making products that speak of their care and their love of the city. So whatever it is that you wear, really, and the bottom line is they all say nice things about Detroit. And isn't it wonderful that there's so many people out there that feel that these days?
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about your store, and where was it originally located? What was the address?
Well, my first store was in the Penobscot building. It was a little 9 by 12 room, which is pretty small. You know, you can.
It's like the size of a bedroom.
Well,
This studio's
small,
huge.
Yeah, smaller than a bedroom, actually. And so that was right by the stairwell on the first floor of the Penobscot building, down the hall from the Caucus Club. And then my next door was called Emily's 2, T-O-O, and that was in the First National Building. That was about 500 square feet. Then a few years later, after having been in both buildings, and you know, when you're in a building, a lot of times it's, oh, they can sell this, you can't sell that. You know, even though I was president of the Merchants Association in the First National Building, I wanted to be independent and separate from all the rules and regulations. So I took over the corner that was DuPont and Company, because they had moved over to the Renaissance Center. All the buildings in that area were pretty empty at the time. So it was a long shot, and it was pretty tough the first few years. It took a lot of moxie and a lot of naivete, I think, you know, not giving up. And you just keep on doing it, pulling it along behind you. And when I first opened the store on the corner of Congress and Shelby, which is right next to the London Chop House, I was very much like a crate and barrel. High-end items, I thought, well, if I have more expensive items, I won't have to sell as much. Well, that didn't work. You know, eventually I found out as I started making some Detroit items that, wow, people really wanted this. They wanted to be in the spirit of feeling good about Detroit, whether it was a bumper sticker that we made, and pretty soon, as I say, my whole store switched over. Everything in the place was something that had Detroit on it. And just the kind of support we got from every age was amazing. The Emily Detroit run was created with just about 90 or 100 runners. I wanted to have a run through the streets of Detroit. I went out and started promoting it. I was up at a radio station. When I got back to the store, Police Chief Jim Bannon had a car waiting for me and took me up to the office, said, "We just heard you promoting a run in the streets of Detroit. No, you can't have a run in the streets of Detroit. You need to go to Belle Isle. You know, there's no permit for something like that." And I started crying. I was like, well, we want to show people that it's safe, because I had just become a runner myself. I had always aspired to be a professional golfer, and before I knew it, you know, that was not something I tried a couple times, and okay, golf is behind me. And I started running, and we would always run in the streets of Detroit, Pooh and I, and who was my partner. And we both felt that the streets were the greatest recreational asset Detroit had. We should be using the streets more. And that's how we came up with the run through the streets of Detroit. And once the police department said, okay, there must be some way we can do this, you know, they really got, as I pushed how important it was that people would be able to go through Greektown, take a run down by what is now Riverwalk. It wasn't Riverwalk then, but Soup Kitchen Saloon. There were actually quite a few establishments down there to take people down around that area, showcase those areas that we felt were a lot of fun and had enthusiasm. It was magic. After we had the first event with 90 to 100 runners, and then the next year we worked real hard. It would build by a couple thousand each year. And what we were appealing to was not the runners. We were appealing to people who didn't come into Detroit. Maybe they were walkers, maybe they were softball players. Whatever way we could get them to come down into the city, it wasn't just the run that people loved, it was the party afterwards. We danced in the street for hours afterwards.
That's great. It's just a celebration of all things Detroit, the human spirit, and happiness at the end of the day.
Well, in those days in the early 70s, because now there's so many runs downtown, we inspired the Turkey Trot to get started, Detroit Free Press, and people are so used to it now, but in those days it was pretty unheard of. What I liked about it was we had judges, we had cab drivers, we had every demographic you can imagine, but when you put people in shorts, you don't know who they are.
Yeah.
You don't know what they do. And it was just a wonderful bringing together of every demographic. And when people dance in the street, we'd go through, like, in our heyday, a couple hundred kegs of beer. Wow. And as the police would say, the worst thing that happened was a case of blisters. We were able to keep, like you saw the pictures, I'm starting to curate a lot of things. I have video from the 70s, which was 3/4-inch video in those days, and I'm just starting now to curate it. And when I put things up, people are like blown away by the crowds.
There's one photo that you just posted.
Looks like the Boston Marathon.
There's
so many people. It's
It
either at
looks
the
like
starting
you just
line or
had,
the finish line. It's got to be the starting line.
It was
like
the
the
start
Stanley
line.
Cup parade. That's what
Yeah.
it looks
Well,
like.
good.
That was
amount
in front of
people.
Cobo Hall, and it's funny because somebody wrote on that after I posted that picture. Wow, is that David Bowie's name up there on the marquee? And I kind of zoomed in on it. I thought, yeah, it is David Bowie. It also says start line, Emily's Detroit run.
That's awesome.
But what I love about that is it's right outside the door of what was then the Detroit Fire Department headquarters. Now it's the Detroit Foundation Hotel. They've done such a wonderful job at maintaining the look of the Detroit Fire Department headquarters. When you walk in the apparatus room, which is the restaurant, they call themselves, they say, we're a restaurant with hotel rooms.
That's nice.
But that apparatus room is very communal. People can go in and plug in their computers and work on their work all afternoon and everything. And they've kept the tile the same. I mean, so much in that hotel. We deliberately started our races outside the Detroit Fire Department headquarters because they were such a big part of our neighborhood in those days. Anybody that remembers, you'd walk by and the guys would be polishing the fire engines and they'd be sitting out around the big red doors that Detroit Foundation Hotel
yeah.
has maintained. Those are the original doors from when it was the fire department.
And Cobo Hall built that?
Yeah, Cobo
it's
Hall,
Cobo
yeah.
that's there.
And I think it was Cobo Hall, now they call it Cobo Center.
Yeah.
Because I've been corrected by a couple of people. I was in the Detroit Foundation Hotel Sunday, and there was a guy standing there, and he went, Emily Gail? And I said, yeah. He said, I'm Joe Connor. I used to run Cobo Center when you had your store. I live in Florida now, but I'm up here for the weekend. And he was staying in Detroit Foundation Hotel.
Well, it's just like DTE. No, it's Pine Knob.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. We have all
Yeah,
those
yeah.
those old memories.
Pine Knob.
And what I love now is, I walk down the street. I mean, it happened to me a couple times today where people go, Emily Gail, God, I used to come into your store when I was a kid. Can I take a picture with you? I love it. But what I also love was what people like yourself. We met in
Kinko's.
Yeah.
what, 6 years ago maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, about 5, yeah.
And I was making signs, saying nice things about Detroit, and you were working on the Undercard, and we made friends, and we've stayed friends, and been mutually supportive. And I love the energy of the people that are doing things in Detroit now, and I call it all our mutual mentoring.
I like it.
Being supportive. I always felt the theory of abundance. There's room for everybody to do good if we can all help each other. It's not about somebody's a competitor. It's why there's auto dealers all in a row someplace, or why you have shopping centers and you have stores all under one roof. You get them out to the shopping center, and what store they end up going into is the store they end up going to. What I love what's going on in Detroit now is there's so many small entrepreneurs, and it's a hard thing when you're trying to do it on your own.
Oh, yeah.
But the mutual support that I see amongst people, and the support I get for what I'm trying to do as I weave myself into the Detroit community, is so heartwarming. I just can't say enough. And you two are like perfect examples of that, of us meeting 7 years ago, not seeing each other a lot, but wishing the best for each other and
Absolutely.
following one another and what
you
we're
come
doing.
home and you see a lot of that when you come back for the Detroit homecoming. You come back for that every year, don't you?
I come each year. This year I was here in June for 5 weeks. I'm here on this trip for 6 weeks. So everything that I'm doing, people say, why don't you just move back? And I always say, I'm working my way back. But I'm 24/7 paying attention to what's going on in Detroit from Hawaii where I live. And Hawaii wasn't someplace like, oh, let's go to Hawaii and live there. We had gone broke with our store. We didn't close it. McDonald's wanted our space. And we fought it in court a couple of years, and in those days it was called somebody else has more money. Now there's another word to it, but it's life, right?
Right.
It happens, and that was a really hard time for us. We had lost our house, we had lost everything. We were literally picking cans out of the trash can on Belle Isle for our next meal. $1.35 omelet in the new coffee shop that had opened up in Greektown. And I always say probably the best thing that ever happened, because when you've been broke a few times, you have a lot more compassion for other people when they have tough times.
Absolutely.
When you mention the support aspect, did you receive any resistance when you first started way back then? Like, of people saying, that was kind of silly of you to be wanting people to say nice things about Detroit?
Mia, that's a great question. I was
that's a
called
really
the perpetual Pollyanna,
Wow.
okay, made fun of. And when they do TV shows, Mort Krim had just come to town, and Mort, they were all very nice, but they would have panel discussions, and there'd be several people maybe talking about all the things that weren't happening in Detroit. And then there'd be me. I was like the chirpy little, but wait a minute, you should come down to Detroit and see how many nice things there are going on. I mean, I lived in the city. We rode our bike to work every day. I loved being in the city, and it just, to me it was like trying to share that enthusiasm of, you know, going over to Belle Isle for your runs or riding your bike. I mean, I can remember being on the riverfront when the Robin Hood flour mill was there. You know,
Oh,
it
wow.
wasn't
So,
River
yeah.
Walk, right?
Right.
I can remember 4th of July being one of the few people sitting on the wall with the fishermen and with my avocados and cheese and bread. That's a recipe I put into a book that was very popular, Eat and Enjoy Detroit. And that was my recipe, was you go buy some cheese and avocados at EO Butcher Shop, you get on your bike, you ride down to the riverfront, you have a great time. You know, to me that was like really an exciting day in Detroit, and it was exciting because it was so city. And I was so envious of the kids that went to Cash Tech, you know, and their whole spirit of being in the city. And so, yeah, being made fun of, absolutely. And I've actually had people, I pulled up the stoplights, you know, here in town, and people will go, they'll look over at me and they'll go, raise their arm and go, Emily, you started all this. So I'm kind of getting the last laugh now.
And now that Detroit is kind of trendy in a lot of ways, what do you think about how Detroit is currently?
Well, I get that question asked a lot, and I think that, you know, when people say, are there 2 Detroits, let's face it, there's 100 Detroits.
Yeah.
There's so many different personalities to it and aspects. It's always in every community. You know, a lot of the things that go on in Detroit aren't unique to Detroit. They're sociological issues that happen in every community. You know, and I've always said, I said it to the school kids when they used to come in the store, that Detroit is a big enough city that it makes a difference in the world, and it's a small enough city that an individual can make a difference. I also say, you know, all that glitters is not gold for everybody, and we have to remember that. You know, that everything that's going on isn't a bonus to everybody that's passing through the city.
Right.
So we have to kind of remember that there's a lot of people struggling. There's a lot of small entrepreneurs, you know, open and close their door every day. It isn't just a blank canvas for everybody to come and do well. Yeah. And that's why I think it's so important, whether people are doing pop-ups at Eastern Market or, I mean, I don't know about you, but every time I walk through any place where there's pop-ups and you see how many people are doing it, I'm so encouraged that so many people have the courage to be small entrepreneurs, and that the environment encourages that right now. Because I don't think you need the big businesses as like anchor, but the fabric of Detroit is the individuals and the small businesses that make things happen.
So a lot of the focus has been on downtown Detroit, it seems like, and I know some people that want to start businesses, they feel like it's kind of unfair as far as the space is extremely limited in downtown, but there's other areas that I feel like they should build up the same way that how they've built up the downtown area.
Well, you know, that's something that we all hear every day, right? And like, who is they?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you can't blame people for picking where they have business. Even when I had the stores and we were really working at it, I have an old newspaper article by Cindy Maher where she writes about us all doing a TV show, and things, the Renaissance had just opened, and if Emily's closed, it would be like the Renaissance closing. You know, it was a beautiful accolade. You know, oh, we're all so encouraged by everything that's going on. And then at the end of her column, she says, you know, it's paragraph after paragraph of glowing things about downtown. At the end, she says, and then a few days later, I drove out to the neighborhoods. Okay, it wasn't such a pretty picture.
Yeah, it gets kind of negative.
So that's the same thing in every community.
Yes.
You know, that there's always going to be sort of a central business district, but I do feel that there's a lot going on in the neighborhoods right now. You know, Mayor Duggan has this, 20-minute thing where you could be able to get anything you need within 20 minutes of a neighborhood, and they're doing like Fitzgerald neighborhood. There's so many in Southwest Detroit neighborhoods that are being focused on. I think there's more going on in the neighborhoods than people give everybody credit for.
Yeah, it's just not as highlighted.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not shiny.
Exactly, Rochelle. I mean, it's like everybody thought we were the only ones doing something. Well, we weren't. We just got a lot of attention. You know, we knew how to get attention. We were doing a lot. I'm not taking away what we did because we worked hard at it. But there were also other people that were doing a lot of things. And I think there's more going on in the neighborhoods, that not just by other businesses and the city, but individuals who had never given up, who keep their block clubs, you know, work through their block clubs to keep them clean. I helped, not helped, but I led the UAD first annual bike event they had for their homecoming last year with a gentleman named Tom Page, who used to be a Detroit police officer, and then he was in LA and came back. And the bike, we went through neighborhoods that I had no clue about how nice they've become.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why Tom created this bike event for UAD's homecoming, was so that there were quite a few of us to ride through the neighborhoods and see, look what these people have kept up in their own neighborhoods. And yet we all drive through areas where we say, wow, you know, this needs some help. But I've been in some neighborhoods where you look around, you know, around the periphery, but there might be 3 or 4 blocks in there where those block clubs are really working hard, and they've been there a long time.
Right.
And what do
they're
you see in
beautiful.
that regard?
I mean, the same thing. I think, you know, if people can expand their perspective when they think Detroit and not think something negative, but when they think downtown Detroit, they think, oh, that's beautiful, I want to go, you know, explore or whatever. Like you said, there's so much more to Detroit in these neighborhoods, although there may not be some great areas all over Detroit. There's more than just downtown Detroit that is really booming.
I was at Sister Pie this morning, and a group of bikers came up, and the lady that was giving the tour said, oh, Emily Gail, and she said, I want all of you to meet Emily Gail. And it was a group of people from the Birmingham Unitarian Church, about 12 or 13 bikers, and she was taking them all around downtown. They went out to, they were in West Village, and she was taking them to some areas, not just downtown. And they were going, they started at Brevard Plaza. People are interested in seeing all those little pockets of neighborhoods that are happening. And they're happening with people and families that have lived there for several generations.
Yeah, and I think those areas are even more special.
I do too. I mean, when I took the bicycle ride out around UAD, I knew about the Fitzgerald neighborhood, but I did not know about University neighborhood, Bagley. There's 5 or 6 neighborhoods in that area that I had no clue about. Each one a little different. You know, it's like if you were to go through Palmer Park or Sherwood Forge, Indian Village, they're all very different.
Unique.
But those neighborhoods are there. You don't hear about them a lot. East Village now.
Yeah.
Jefferson Chalmers, some of the things that are happening over in that area. Yes, we do need more, but I kind of, when I hear people say nothing's happening in the neighborhoods, I'm kind of like, yes, there is. There's people who have lived there for a long time that have really been
Put it
working
together,
hard. Yeah, they're not waiting for people from the outside. Look, Luther Keith just had his Arise Detroit, which was 200 neighborhoods, all on the same day, August 4th, all celebrating what they do in their own neighborhoods. And exposing. I mean, 200 neighborhoods, that's a lot of different, who would ever think there's that many groups amongst the neighborhoods out there? So I think it's, as we get more attention and the media covers those things, and I think they try to do a pretty good job. So,
I'm very happy for the people, you know, this is before I even met Rochelle and the Undercard was around, but a house in Corktown, a couple blocks off Michigan Avenue, was a really easy investment. It wasn't a lot of money to put down, and it was a place where Detroiters or people that wanted to move Detroit could afford. There's, you know, stuff was climbing, and now that Ford's putting their headquarters in there, the people that stuck around, I'm really excited for them, because not only did your property value skyrocket overnight, but they believed in Detroit. A lot of those Corktown people believed in Detroit before Corktown was, Corktown, obviously an Irish community for a long time, but those were the houses that people typically moved into. Jimmy lived in Hamtramck. That's another neighborhood surrounded by Detroit, in which a little bit more affordable living and stuff. And if Hamtramck was all of a sudden to have a Ford plant put in there, it's neat to see some of those people that believed in Detroit before now going to reap some benefits and be a part of the rebuilding.
You don't even need a Ford plant. When I first moved in there, the general rent for a flat or an apartment was around $500 to $600. That was the general thing. Just out of curiosity, because I lived there for about 6 years. Just out of curiosity,
And
I
you
looked
had
up.
you had a 3-bedroom, right?
I had a 3-bedroom flat,
Right.
upper flat. Yep. It was big. It was like the size of a small ranch house, basically. But I looked at what people were trying to rent places for in Hamtramck, and it was closer to $900 to $1,000. So I mean, just in 6 years, the value of living in Hamtramck went up to such a point that
Because it's trendy.
it's trendy, and that's exactly what it is. It's now all the hipsters have moved in, and there's a lot more bars, and
Well,
there's
a
a
lot
lot
of
more
them can't
things
afford
going on.
to live in Midtown now.
Right,
so they've
because
moved
it went
to
up.
Hamtramck.
But that was the thing is when I lived in Midtown for a while, and it was $600-700 for rent, and now it's like $1,500 for rent. So everybody moved to Hamtramck. Well, now it's starting to move up again, and pretty soon, and that's the positive thing about it, but it's also the negative thing about it.
I agree.
that's
And
the
even
challenge.
parking, you look at, all of us that have been around a lot, you knew where you could slip in and go get a parking space, right?
Right, exactly.
And now it's like totally
Yeah.
different. So
I
it's
hate
that
parking in
balance,
Detroit.
how do we balance out for everybody?
Well, you have to
I
reward
can't
the people.
stand parking in Detroit. Just cannot stand it. I take Uber
How
everywhere.
do you really feel?
We know some people, and we can't mention names, that are trying to reward people that were here beforehand, and it's difficult because when certain companies come in or certain economic factors go in, you don't want to chase out somebody that was part of the community beforehand, and that's the danger of when a Little Caesars Arena opens in the Cass corridor and stuff. You want to reward the people that were here, and you don't want them to be run out because of high rent. Those are challenges that I always say are for people that are smarter than me. We do gotta wrap up here with Emily T. Gail, but two things I want to happen. And Rochelle says, anything I need for the undercard, Rochelle always says, you know what, do it. So I am going to make a proclamation right now. Rochelle, I am giving you a task. You have a year to complete it. You can use the Ring Girls or whatever you need. But I would like you to start a petition to get a street named after Emily Gail. And I think that we can do that at events and whatever it takes. If ever somebody deserved a street named after her in Detroit, I'd like to see that. Now, Emily, I'm going to give you a challenge, too.
Okay.
People loved your race so much. Let's bring it back.
Well,
Let's do it opposite the turkey trot in spring and have you come back and let's do the Emily run.
Well, let me address both of those. One is that I put on an event at Detroit Foundation Hotel, and somebody gave an early announcement to me, which I'm still getting over that announcement, son, about Emily T. Gail Way.
Oh, well, someone's ahead of me.
And they've
That is
started to
amazing.
work on it. The other thing is, I've had a vision in my mind ever since we did go broke. I ended up going out to Hawaii to be race director of the Ironman because we had done the Ironman in the early days, and we had helped them a lot in the early days. Now it's so big, but in the early days, they didn't know a whole lot about what they were doing, and we did. And they would come to Detroit to see how we did things. And from that day years ago, 30 years ago, broke, going out there, I always said, I'm going to go back to Detroit and shed a bright light on things. And fortunately, I didn't have to shed the bright light because it was in the hearts of people. But I always had a vision of, in fact, even the people at Detroit Foundation Hotel, every time they see that picture, they say, we got to reboot it. And I always say, believe me, I have had a plan for a long time. So
I'd love
yeah.
to see it.
It's cooking.
yeah, I got a plan.
Bring
Yeah,
it back.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
agree.
Well, Emily, I want to thank you for joining us. We got to get to our last guest here, Britain Hart. Feel free to stick around and because we love you, a part of the show. But I'm glad somebody's on top of that. Send us their info because we'd love to help make that happen.
Do that. If I can just toss one thing out, I'm curating a lot of videos and photos and everything from the 1970s and 80s, and we're selling shirts and say nice things about Detroit items at GreatLakesport.com. And if people use they're all around town, but they use the promo code Emily at GreatLakesport.com. They'll ship everything out for free, any orders over $25. But it's really fun to be looking at this old video and starting to put it up for people to see, like you saw the pictures.
I love it.
Yeah, so I love it. I love being part of your show. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Let's call Britain Hart really quick. She had a tough battle against Beck Rawling in the Bare Knuckle 2 fight, which happened in New Orleans, Louisiana. We're going to talk to her briefly.
Hello.
Hey, Britain. It is Brad from the Undercard. You're live on the air. How are you?
I'm doing great, Brad. How are you?
Good. We are joined by Britain Hart, who is a pro boxer, not only a pro boxer, but also a bare knuckle fighter. We were supposed to have her on last week, but we had technical difficulties. She had a fight against Beck Rawlings down in Louisiana. How are you?
I'm doing good. Definitely wish the circumstances were a little bit different, but hey, you know what? I was honored, and I felt like I was part of a historical event, so I'm doing pretty good.
Well, we always stick behind fighters whether they win or lose because it takes a lot of heart to get in there. And not only that, uh, we'd have you on anyways because very fascinated with the sport. But you held your own in there, and it was a very close decision. Tell us a little bit about bare knuckle boxing. I've not watched a lot of it, but one thing I do gather from it is that you have to be very sharp with your hand and eye coordination. It's a lot easier to hit somebody with a glove than a bare knuckle because you got such a small like arrow. Tell us the differences between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy kind of looking. If you would have talked to me before the fight, I think my answer would have been completely different now that I've actually experienced and gone through it. So it's definitely really neat to be able to talk about it as, I've witnessed it and been there firsthand. I remember, fighting it. To me, it felt just like a boxing match. Like I treated it just like a boxing match, even though I did get a few clinches in. But you do have to be more precise, and I think that's where you would see in my fight particularly. You kind of just have to set up the shots a little bit more. You can't just go in, as you saw, there was one fight earlier on in the card, and the guy just goes in swinging and hits as hard as he can. He ends up, hurting and damaging both of his hands. So you have to, keep that aware, and that's something that you have to be more calculated. You just don't go in swinging. You have to go in, and it's almost like playing chess. You want to set up your shots and your moves to where, you're not going to have any damage to your hands because, once your hand, as you can see, you break your hand, like sometimes that will just take it out of you where you just fall to the ground. But so just more cautious on the shots that you take, landing them. It's a little bit more. It was a little bit different, but I thought, to be honest with you, I thought it would be a lot more different than boxing. But to me, I just remember going back and thinking, this is just a boxing match for me. Like I treated it just like I would any boxing match.
Now, some casual observations. One, it's not a ring. It's actually kind of an oval or a complete circle with turnbuckles kind of around it. Two, you start off rounds in an inner circle that's marked off by like a line so that you don't come out from a corner and you kind of start trading blows from there. You mentioned obviously your hands can get easily hurt because you're just using a simple wrap. How do you train for a bare knuckle fight? Because it's tough. You can't go through a complete training camp doing bare knuckles because you're going to get a boxing break. What's different with the training, specifically hand-wise, how you work?
Yeah, actually, I was pretty, I don't know if we want to call this a fortunate or unfortunate thing, but in my life, I've definitely had my fair share of hitting hard objects. So, I already have pretty strong hands and, calcium deposits where I've hit hard objects just from past, just silly, stupid things. But basically, when I realized that bare knuckle fighting was going to be a sport, I would just kind of start hitting the heavy bag with no gloves. So that was like a first step. And then you just kind of increase the, on the surfaces, how hard you're hitting, and then the surfaces get harder. So I use some other things like, sand and concrete kind of things like that to kind of strengthen them up too. I will say this, even though I probably wasn't very vocal about it, I was worried about my hands because everybody stressed that so much on your hands being able to break, and if you hit somebody wrong, it being an injury. I've already broken my hand before, so I was kind of in the back of my head kind of worried about it. But honestly, walking out of the fight, like right now, my hands have no damage to them at all. They were a little bit red, yeah, there's some bruising, but I can still go to a punching bag right now and punch it as hard as I wanted to and be fine.
The other thing I noticed is the face swelling, and I saw you joking about it on social media, but because you're hitting somebody with a clean fist and a wrap, it's a little bit more swelling than just a boxing glove over a shorter amount of rounds. That's something you can't prepare for either. Nor can a cut man. I saw Stitch was there. Nor can a cut man prepare for that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I remember talking, that's like I said, my opinion has kind of changed. My hands are completely fine, but my face is definitely swollen and more so than it's ever. I've been in some pretty rough boxing matches, and I've never had this reaction. So I definitely, my face is extremely swollen and definitely black and blue, which, I guess could be, is understandable that, it's just a bit of fair enough, but you can't prepare, you can't get toughen your face up before the fight, but it is what it is. Thankful I do have a fractured nose, so I didn't break my nose, but it's been broken before, so, it's a little bit more common to get that in, any combat sport. So, but other than that, that's the only out of everything, the only damage I incurred was the hairline fracture of my nose.
Well, we want to thank you for joining us for a few minutes on the undercard. Sorry it couldn't happen last week, and we know the results, but we'll have you on. Something tells me you're gonna, since you were the main event and you did pretty good against somebody that, I read some reports that girl was supposed to roll you just because of experience. You held your own. You look good in there. Something tells me we're going to see you in bare knuckle boxing a few more times, and I'd love to see you in the box ring too. The one thing I did like fight week, Beck clearly was playing the evil villain, but you kept it positive and you were giving the love wins message, which I always love, the people that give the love wins message. So I think you, regardless of records, got a good fan base and are positive for the sport.
Perfect. Well, that's definitely what I wanted to do, and that kind of showed, I was really down on, the fact that, I really believed it. I really wanted to win, like, more than anything. So I was kind of bummed because I feel like I didn't keep up my part of the bargain as far as telling everybody that I would win, that I'd do it for them, and that I would show them that. But, I think that in the long run, when I look at it, winning comes in so many other forms and shapes, and, even though I did bring the belt, I mean, the response that I've gotten from people and just them seeing me go out there and yeah, exactly. Like I remember going in before the fight, right before I was about to fight, some guy walked by me and he said, "Yeah, you better go do a good job because I just stood up for you." He says they were all talking about how you were going to get knocked out the first round. And I was saying, "No way." I seen the look in that girl's eyes. There's no way she was going to get knocked out first round. And I think a lot of people were kind of thinking that the experience was mismatched and that Beck was just going to destroy me. And I mean, I was just so happy to leave proof that that was no way going to happen. And it was a split decision, but I have a lot of people that really made me feel like a winner in this, and that I could still be me and show that a different side of female boxing. You don't have to be the tough, mean, all the way evil kind of villain going into boxing. That you can be someone who has passion, and really be a good person and get it the right way. So definitely it means a lot to me that you say that, and that the recognition on it. I definitely will be back around. This is not the end of me. I can tell you that for sure. Whether it's boxing or bare knuckle, I mean, fighting is my home. I think bare knuckle really had a great response, so I'm just excited about the future altogether.
Awesome. Really quickly, for people that want to follow your career, where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. It's Britain Hart on Facebook. I'll definitely get an athlete page since I think a lot of people have reached out and really would like that. So I'll definitely have that up. And then my Instagram is Britain Hart _. So super easy to find. I'm definitely more active on Facebook than anything, but I'm definitely going to find a way to reach out because my biggest thing in me fighting. A lot of people say fight for yourself, fight for yourself. Well, I've done that my whole life. That's what I've been doing. I want to show that I can fight, and inspire, and my hopes and goals were to change the world and change people's perceptions on things that they think that they know about, and kind of open doors that way. So I would love for people to kind of see that and be able to inspire people. So definitely find me those ways.
Well, I tell you what, too, you had one of the coolest fight team shirts I've ever seen, too. If you send one my way, I'll wear it at an event or something like that. I don't even know if you have my size. It would be like a double XL. But your fight shirt was pretty awesome. Been doing this for a long time, and a cute little logo. Everything about it was really it was a good fight shirt, and we appreciate you joining us.
Awesome. Yeah, did you see the back of the fight shirt, what it said?
I didn't see the back of it. I saw the front of it from the camera angles, but what'd the back say?
It says 1,000 dreams. So
I love it.
It's kind of reaching out as a message, reaching out. It doesn't matter if you have one dream or 1,000 dreams. You just try to reach them the best you can.
Well, I love your positivity, and I love that you got it, first off, out of the fight unscathed. Everything will heal, and I can't wait for you to be back on, a card, whether it be boxing or bare knuckle. So thank you so much for joining us, Britain.
Perfect. Thank you, and have a great rest of your night, okay?
All right, that is Britain Hart wrapping up one hell of a show, Jimmy. Episode 284, Emily T. Gail, who I call the ambassador of Detroit. Thank you so much for joining us.
I love being here. Mia, nice to meet you. Rochelle, good to see you. Jimmy, nice to see you again, too.
I remember my name this time.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
And Andy Dirks, who we took a long time with Andy, but he had a lot to say. I love when, Emily did the same thing. When you ask a question and they really take their time with it and think about it and give educated responses. I mean, we can only do as well as we can sometimes with questions, and Andy and Emily did a great job, even Britain there at the end. And Mia, you had Mia might have had one of the best questions
I think
there
so. That was
to
really
Emily.
right.
So I greatly appreciate that. We're wrapping up 284. We will be back next week, 285. I actually turned 41 before then, so we'll probably celebrate that in traditional fashion. And we'll be
here?
out there, probably.
Yeah.
And I'll talk to you, everybody, soon. Take care.